there's miraculous healing, and then there's the miracle of like I'm working through this pain with God, and I don't even know it's happening until it's done. Like some of the stories I've shared, and you look back and you go, oh, miracle, right? Like
that's right.
That I could do that at all was supernaturally buoyed up, right?
Come on.
Listen, I would have loved to have been just, whoop,
zap.
There you go, Ryan. That would have been great, but apparently it's not why I have my experience, right? And I'm comfortable with. It's like a crusade for me. We're going to destigmatize mental health. People should get help. I don't care where you are, who you are, right? And so it's never been more available now, which is nice, but can you avoid these traumas, and particularly these hard ones? No, right?
Yeah.
Like, no, you can't. That childhood experience is going to color every aspect of how you see the world. And you already know it. You can see the proof in your relationships, in some of maybe even the diagnoses you've been given.
Yeah.
And maybe
it's just wild. We literally carry it in our bodies, don't we?
100%.
Welcome to the Ferment podcast, conversations about worship and transformation. Today's guest is counselor Ryan Albrecht.
Ryan, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, sir.
You said when you came in here, between two ferns.
Yeah.
It might actually be our aesthetic. I think we accidentally did it.
It's following suit, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It feels like this could go any number of ways.
Between two ferns without the insults, though.
I'm gonna do my best to be. I'm gonna be the straight guy. Okay. So if you want to insult, that's fine. But I'm gonna do my best to be the straight guy. Okay. Hey. Let's just start right here.
Yeah.
I know you from like Vineyard Worship retreats.
Yeah.
I know your wife. I think people in the Northeast know you.
Some, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of people in Vineyard Worship across the country probably don't know who you are.
Definitely not.
Okay, so let's just do this. Who are you? Where'd you come from? And what has happened in your life? What kind of family did you have? Was it a family of faith? You know, the stuff we talk about on the Ferment all the time.
All the usual hits. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, cool. Yeah, so I am turning 39 in February.
Yeah. I know you have a baby.
I have a baby who just turned 1 a couple weeks ago.
That's right.
So that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah.
And you'll see a theme in my story might be there's a late blooming element to a lot of my experience.
Yeah.
I grew up on Long Island in Nassau County.
Yeah,
right?
you sound like a New Yorker.
I should. Yeah. Try as I might. I can even intentionally try to pronounce water differently.
Yeah.
But naturally, it's just water.
Water.
Yeah, there's an AU in there from where I'm from. That's the way it is. But Long Island, it's funny. There's not a lot of optics on Long Island in general, I think. Right? When a lot of people in the Vineyard know New York, they know Syracuse for the just towering amount of things going on up there, right? But that's a solid 5 hours from where I'm from. I'm about 15 miles from the city, and in a unique place that has ever more felt more like Queens as the spillover continues. Nassau's incredibly it's wildly populated.
Yeah.
And I've
Is
tried
it diverse like Queens as well?
Yeah. Diverse, but maybe a little more cleverly segregated.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, through random things like the highway design system.
Yeah, of course.
Stuff like that. You tend to come from multiple towns. You have the place you grew up in, but maybe you played sports here and you're in this town, but you're actually that school district.
Yeah.
And lots of private schools, so you might have gone through a Catholic school at some point, further stretching your reach out. So you're kind of from a bunch of towns. I like it that way, quite frankly. I've tried to leave a bunch. God just doesn't let me go. So
you're a Long Islander. That's just what you are.
Apparently. Yeah. Even when I come here, I'm scouting out places to live. We're in Arizona. I'm like, this is a nice vibe.
Yeah.
What's this like? You know?
But in your heart, you're not leaving.
No. Yeah. No. Try as I might. Again, And
okay, so what kind of family did you have?
So the family, youngest of 5. And I'm, again, 39, so that gives you some context. My older siblings are in their later 50s.
Yeah.
Right.
Were you the classic baby?
Yeah. I have a sneaking suspicion that I was because I'm 4 years from the nearest. So I think it was kind of like oops.
Yeah.
Here he is.
Yeah.
Right. And so also the tired parents, right? Like the range of issues.
That's we just things we cared about. We don't care about anymore.
Oh, Ryan needs his own table by the TV. He's got it because honestly, my eldest teenager is getting into all types of trouble, and this kid's pretty good on his own, right? It was a lot of that.
Yeah.
Small house, as middle class as you can get.
Yeah.
Dad worked 2 jobs. Mom was a stay-at-home mom. both born in the 40s, right? So we kind of had that classical thing going on. And small home, a lot of us. Again, lots of dynamic ranges. So, and I mentioned that because it plays into who I became. And I think part of that story will end up telling in terms of mental health and things like that.
Sure.
Where I became very good at entertaining myself as a young man, right? Because there's always another problem, probably bigger than what I was experiencing.
Yeah.
So as a child, athlete, smart, good in school, right? Generally not a lot of problems. I went to a small private school, Catholic school down the road. Yeah, so there wasn't a whole lot you needed to do other than get me places. My siblings will call me the golden child in terms of experience.
So if you went to Catholic school, does that mean you had a family of faith, or were they just like, we want to send you to Catholic school because it's a good school?
Yeah, it's nominally so, I think, were we Catholic, except I remember as a kid, like, buying into it, right? Because it was also my schooling. I was an altar boy. And so for me, I would serve masses. It wasn't just we showed up on a Sunday every now and again, you know, memorial masses for maybe a deceased family member, the holidays, the usual stuff. It was like I did it more, but it wasn't necessarily as a family. Like I don't remember my dad being in church ever.
Yeah.
Right.
But you were interested.
I was interested. There was something in the metaphysics of it, I think, that intrigued
You had God
me.
consciousness.
Yeah.
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 Okay. So like as a kid, besides being an altar boy, like does it show up any other way? Were you thinking about Jesus? Did you pray as a kid?
Yeah, I think I did often enough, you know, and you would get ready for your sacraments and stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like, and there's a lot of it that even as a young child, I felt like this seems like a lot to do, you know, like this, it's like we're up, we're down, like we're sitting, we're praying. I can only ask for forgiveness in this booth on Saturday afternoons. And I'm just like, go pray these 10 things over here. Yeah. But I did find peace in the tradition of it because my house is pretty chaotic.
Okay.
Right. So I think there was something in that for me as well. And I think as a kid, I might be described as a pretty good kid. I think I was pretty conscious of other people and, you know, like I didn't like bullies when I was younger. You know what I mean? Like that kind of a thing. There was a moral compass.
Yeah, that's right. So if your house was chaotic, what kind of chaos? Like, was it just lots of people in a little house and so it's loud? Or is it like older siblings are just kind of doing what older siblings do? They're out like running the streets and
both, right?
Okay, yeah.
Both for sure. It was loud. Shared a room with my nearest brother. Needed a sound machine to go to sleep because everything would just still be going on. But my oldest siblings, who maybe were in their early 20s, things like that, getting into all types of troubles, not liking the boyfriend of this one.
That's right.
You know, this one going out, drinking, getting caught, things like that. Yeah. So something bigger to yell at than me per se. But yeah, so that kind of chaos though, for sure.
Okay, and then when you got older, did the chaos find you, or were you always the golden boy?
No, I very much became the chaos creator.
The chaos creator.
At some point, yeah, there was a flip. So I guess part of the story would be that 8th grade, my father gets diagnosed with cancer.
Okay.
And very quickly, I mean, it was within 9 months he passed away.
Oof.
That quick. But they kind of like truth came out later on. Like I didn't know. They were kind of keeping me in the dark from that thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a very quick turnaround and he passed away. And I would later come to find out that the chemo was just really beating him up. And he was just decided to stop doing treatments. And that's why his kidneys were shutting down. There was just all types of stuff. So once he passed away, the all-star pitcher and, you know, basketball center and like the kid who was, he gets great grades, doesn't seem to try very hard with it. Teachers love him. That turned real quick within a calendar year, I think, right? Angry young man.
So were you close to your father?
You know,
or was it just the grief of like losing your dad? And
you know, grief is an interesting thing because it might take you a decade to learn that it's about what you lost, not what was lost.
Okay, talk to me about that.
You know, right? Yeah. So a lot of people
just riff on that.
On that for a second. So you know, the hard part with grief is admitting the side that feels selfish. Once you move past the tragedy and the initial shock, where people tend to get stuck, in my experience, is I lost something and it feels bad to admit it. Right. So whatever it is I lost. So for all my dad tried to be around, he was putting 5 kids through school and
That's right.
sports, and so I can respect what that is. But as a child, we are created, no matter what, for better or worse. Right? Like our childhood experiences form, and so there was like, oh man, I never got to know the guy.
Yeah.
Maybe didn't have a male example, and then off to high school I went.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's where turns further for even me, right? Like,
and a moment ago you used the phrase "angry young man."
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. What does that mean?
It means, again, so being God conscious, I think, also makes you conscious to, at a young age, right? Even kind of the bigger asks of the universe, right? And the confusion of just the human experience. And, later I learned to call that existentialism, right? Like the tragedy hits and you are left understanding that, like, oh, mortality is near. And what does that mean for me? And what am I doing? I'm playing sports. Am I playing them for me? Am I playing them for other people? Because this is going to get you to college for free, Ryan. So sure, I'll get a pitching coach and I'll pitch year round. And do I enjoy it?
Not so much.
I love music. I love skateboarding. I was always kind of countercultural.
Yeah.
The problem is when you want another counterculture, it's already right there for you,
Yeah.
So angry young man found more angry young men.
Yeah.
You kind of gravitate, you find your tribe. My tribe was kids with trauma, kids with pain, kids who were doing drugs, kids who were drinking a ton, right? And that very, very quickly became just what I did.
Yeah. So like drugs and alcohol just became a part of your life after your father passed?
Yeah. By the end of 9th grade, for sure.
Yeah. At the time, were you even aware, like, oh, I'm just sad?
Yeah. I think I was conscious of being sad.
Yeah.
But I think I was also really angry, and there's...
Angry at God?
Angry at God for
Life,
sure. Life, God,
Yeah.
parents, family, my dad for leaving, right? You name it.
Sure.
The list goes on. My siblings for not being what I thought a sibling should be at that time. My nearest brother not having a relationship with me. All that stuff really coalesced. And then the thing that I had been teetering on mentioning during this was at the same time, roughly leading up to that, there was physical abuse towards me within a power dynamic at the church, right? The Catholic Church. So I had that, then that.
Yeah.
And then...
You got angry.
Really angry.
Okay.
Really angry.
So were you just, at that point, were you just a street urchin? You're just like out on the streets?
Yeah, Catholic school by day. I would wave the bus on. I'd go out with my skateboard and my sneakers on and my uniform, and I'd just wave the bus. And I'd just go skate to my friend's high school in the other town over and be like, all right, guys, what are we doing today?
That's right.
Okay,
I know this is kind of a heavy story, but I just want to take one little left-hand turn here.
Please.
On your skateboard, could you kickflip?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I was definitely the worst skater in the bunch, but it gave me license to be there, right?
Yeah,
it was a social tool.
Yeah, that's right.
Pre-Tony Hawk, so you're those dirtbags over there.
Well, yeah, and there's something about skate culture too.
Yeah.
Like it's a tribe.
For sure.
Like both of my boys grew up and they were like little skater guys.
Yeah.
And it's like in our city, there's not a ton of skate kids, but trust me, they all know each other.
Absolutely.
They're thick as thieves.
Oh yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. This is pre-skate park, so we're running from people trying to get us to stop doing what we're doing, and with that came just I always loved music, loved it, right? Big music, right? Always. I remember people were like, "Do you understand what this song is about?" And I'd be like, "Yeah, it's about this," and they'd be like,
"Yeah, you do understand."
Yeah, I'm like, "Yeah, very much so." My dad loved music, so it was like just my life was always soundtracked. Mm-hmm. Skate culture.
Well, music and skate culture go hand in hand.
Hand in hand. Mid-'90s, punk rock all day long, And at that point, I'd already been into, first wave emo and punk rock and hardcore Minor Threat and Fugazi, right? So, like, I just found all of my tribes at once. I'm going to play in a bad band, power chords all day. I'm going to skateboard, be pretty chaotic.
So did you play guitar?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. You play guitar in a band?
Yes.
Okay, what was your band called?
Yeah. The first one, I believe... that we had many iterations, but one of them was the Malt Liquor Bandits.
The Malt Liquor Bandits.
Yes, thanks to my friend Joe, who just, he was a big Dead Kennedys guy, and everything was a tongue-in-cheek, chaotic joke. But I learned how to play on my dad's guitar.
Okay.
Right? He meaning making is another theme, Adam, and he had got a guitar when he got sick. He always wanted to learn, never did. Yeah. He passed before he got any good. I just picked it up, and I learned watching music videos. If we remember those, right? Like on MTV and things. I'm like, I can do what he's
minutes.
doing. Yep. And I just be like, oh, he's doing that with his hands. I can do that. And that's how I learned a power chord. And I had an ear, and that was it.
Yeah, you went to it.
Yeah, big time.
Okay. So you're a musician. You're out.
Yep.
Drugs and alcohol have become a constant theme. You and I shared just before we started the cameras that at a certain point, this gets some steam, right? Like this becomes an avalanche.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So just talk to me about like where does this trajectory go?
For sure. We could, statically stays pretty similar. I can hold things together pretty well for the most part. And I just do what I want to do, basically, becomes the theme. Like, I didn't want to be in Catholic school anymore, so I failed classes, so they sent me to public school. Hindsight, bad idea. Yeah. Way more freedom to make more mistakes. Yeah. But again, for the things that I was doing, and I would be what I would call a garbage pail kid. I would do anything. It didn't matter what it was called. Didn't matter how scary it was to people. Yeah. I tried at least once. Yeah. And that's not very sustainable, as you could imagine. Yet somehow I always managed it, and I could see God's hand in my life. Because by rights, I should not be here. And in my early 20s, I'm in a band. I'm touring. I'm like, I'm not going to college right now. I'm going to do this band thing and see the country and do all that stuff.
Punk band?
I guess we were emo, right? My contemporaries are in bands that still make music that we call emo, right? I grew up with the drummer from Taking Back Sunday, and it's not a name drop. It's just this is the environment I was in.
That's right.
We hung out, we played music. I was in a different band. We toured a bunch, put out some CDs, and more license to do whatever I please. Yeah. And then the identity starts changing, right? Because now I'm in a different city often. I could be whoever I want to be, right? Addicts tend to be chameleons and people who can fit in different spaces. So I developed or lost a sense of firm identity, right? And this keeps going on and on and on. And then my mom has her first bout with cancer, and I'm in between junior college and regular college, deciding if I want to go and get a bachelor's degree. And she ends up having some procedures, and it's in remission. Yeah. Oh, well, amen. Yeah. I don't have to go to college because she wants to see me do that. I can keep doing this thing. And then about 2 years later, it comes back. And she's given a really bad prognosis. She should only have a few more months. So I'm like, well, I'll go to college. Yeah. Except I now have a pretty steady habit of doing any drug I can for protracted periods of time until I can run out. It's not an easy story to tell. It's not just I drank and I smoked weed. It's, it's ecstasy and hallucinogens and cocaine and you name it.
And it was the 90s too. I mean, like, I don't know if this is a part of your story, but like the 90s rave scene in MDMA was a big thing.
Yep. Those are the guys I would get it from.
Yeah.
Rave's not for me, musically speaking.
Correct.
But this is fun stuff, right?
Yeah.
And turns out it helps me feel in a way I don't feel when I'm not
for a while
awake.
Yeah.
Yeah, right? So when I'm normal, I'm totally ambivalent to life and anything, right? I've got nothing in the tank. But I can use these different substances to drive my human experience or manufacture what I think is a human experience for myself. And
so did mom's cancer diagnosis, did that re-push like a almost a button?
Yeah.
Like the dad cancer button?
For sure.
Yeah.
In a real way. And it's funny because I usually forget this part, but the year before my mom got that terrible diagnosis, I found myself in a evangelical type of fellowship of people who like offshot from this youth group and planted this church, but they were running out of a VFW hall, and it felt like the band scene, except everyone was happier. And I would show up there and play guitar, and I was just sober, kind of by mistake, for most of that year. It's funny. We're so Catholic on Long Island, or Jewish or whatever, especially back then. Now we're mid 2000s, right? That my mom had a private investigator check out the church. She's like, he's in a cult. My son's in a cult.
I love this.
My son's in a cult. Who are these people?
Okay.
Playing contemporary music to Jesus. What is this whole thing about? They seem nice, but I don't trust them.
That is genuinely funny.
It's amazing. You can't. And it needs to be mentioned because that's the context for my faith too, though, right? Yeah. It's like you're either in this big building and it's impersonal. And then I had experiences of abuses of power, or it's this like grassrootsy thing, but it kind of could be a cult.
Yeah. What is this?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so when you went to that, I'm assuming, are you going just because it's music? Is it just like the music that's there?
Yeah, one guy, he used to come to my shows and he would come talk to me, and I'd be like literally stumbling out of the knitting factory in Manhattan, playing a show, drunk, whatever, and he'd be like, man, you really should come to church. And like one day, like I'm like, I guess I'm gonna go because this guy won't stop. He just won't stop asking me.
So why was he so persistent with you? Because that feels bold, right?
It does. But I guess if we could talk to him now and he's still around, he would say things like, yeah, man, I saw a call on your life. Hey, man, I saw something in you. I saw this.
Did he talk to you like that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And he brought me to that church and they're like, come play guitar. I was like, okay. And I would just show up. I wouldn't know the music. I'd just plug in all my pedals and be like, well, all right, we'll see what happens. What's a key? I didn't know what a key change was. I didn't know how to use a capo.
Yeah.
And it'd be years before I learned it. But I just did that thing there, and I was baptized there. And then when my mom got her diagnosis, I was like, hey, guys, like, I know me, and I know where this is going. Mm. And they were like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, oh, man, I'm going to be using a lot of drugs. I can tell you right now, I'm not going to cope well with this, And they're like, well, maybe you should step back and this and that. So they were still there for me, but I felt some betrayal in that moment.
Yeah.
And I now can recognize the difficult place they were in, right?
Yeah.
But what ended up happening was I just kind of was like, okay, I guess I'll stick around. But I didn't have a real relationship with Jesus yet.
Yeah.
This was all, to my mind, just like a cosmic mistake or a joke. I just found myself here.
Yeah.
So now it's like, all right, I'm going back to college, I'm working. My mom's terminally ill. I'm the only one who lives in the house with her. Mm. And my sisters, everyone fantastic, right? Daytime, they would take care of her. And then my night times would be homework and concern with what's going on with her. Might I have to take her to the hospital? Because it would happen regularly. So I would install those little, not baby monitors, but kind of like a Radio Shack version of all around to keep an ear out and do my work. And I'd have to give her meds. Mm. So cue the opioid epidemic.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So you're like, great, new pills.
They were droppers. And at the time, I was really naive about it, or I pretended to be naive about it. Yeah. I'm not sure, quite frankly, but it'd be a little for her, a little for me. And oh, look, I'm calm. Yeah. I can go write this paper on the Ottoman Empire because I was a history and political science major. I can get up and go to school, go to work, and maintain. Mm-hmm. And that took me forever to get here, I feel like. But that's the turn, right? So now it's opioids. Mm. And now you need them to function.
How long did it take for them to be like, get into you where you were like, I need this?
Yeah. Again, the naivete here is heavy. So I would go on and off, and I never really attached why I felt sick at times to that. But then when my mom passed away and the nurse threw away all the drugs and I was sick leaving the cemetery, I was like, oh
no.
Yeah.
Was that a sinking feeling?
It was.
Yeah.
It was, but I was well equipped to answer it.
Yeah, I was going to say, but it wasn't a wake up call necessarily.
No, it was like, oh, I need to just go get more stuff now. Mm-hmm. Where can I do that? And that was easy enough because quite literally the opioid epidemic was an epidemic for a reason. The deli I worked at, the pharmacy next door, family-run place, that guy supplied a dude I worked with, and now I had a steady stream and money from deceased parents.
Yeah,
and that's kind of how the next couple of years of my life went.
Yeah, mostly just pills,
and then they did get harder to get, and then more expensive, and I was in a studio by myself, working 2 delivery jobs. So actually just getting heroin was on the table, and it was easier and it was cheaper. You spend some time there. Now people know you can hide pills. You can't hide. But at this point, I'm a pariah, right? My family is like, we can't have you coming over like this. You can't stay here. We got kids.
Yeah.
So
you're being cut out.
Yeah, rightfully so.
How do you feel?
In some ways, just like that 15-year-old kid who threw everything else away before. Mm-hmm. And it was like, all right, well, I know this.
Yeah.
And so I've had 3 overdose experiences, survived them all, shockingly. And I mean, as I could tell you a billion stories of this time period to when we moved on to the hopeful part.
Right. That's right.
But assume it's not pretty. Assume the law is involved. Assume People don't trust me.
All the things.
Assume plenty of people wanted to fix me and couldn't and got hurt by trying to fix me.
Yeah.
And
so why did you quit? We'll just put it that way.
Yeah, why did I quit?
What happened? Was there a God intervention? Or did you just hit rock bottom? Did you go to AA? What did you do?
Yeah, all of that happened. And so I was having tons of anxiety, and I was like, I can't get a script for this, so I'm just going to buy some and keep it around, right? So I had some Xanax around, and I managed my anxiety for a couple months like that, like an addict would. One night I was bored. I'm like, I'm going to do it all. So I have a blackout weekend of 3 or 4 days where I basically, from what I could put together just from receipts and people who I ran into, all over Long Island, just all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And apparently, just from the talk screen, I had done everything else again too, where I thought I had managed that. And this weekend ends up with me in my sister bought my mother's house after she died. I ended up in the driveway with a car with a cracked windshield, a huge dent across the front, like I hit something, a pole.
Something.
Right? Don't know how I got there, woken up by an EMT, breathing very, very slowly, because an opioid overdose is not terrifying. You just slowly stop breathing, right? And I was only having a few breaths per minute, apparently. So I was already passed out. My sister saw me in the driveway, called an ambulance. I got a Narcan shot, and the guy said, do you want to go to the hospital and maybe rehab? And I said, okay.
Yeah.
I looked around and I was like, And that was the moment where things like shifted, and, I wasn't treated very well in the hospital, and a volunteer came up to me and they're like, have you had food? Have you been able to brush your teeth? You've been here 3 days. You're just in a gurney in the ER. And I was like, no, none of that. She got a social worker. That social worker in 2 days had me in a program, and off I went.
And you were ready.
I was ready, terrified, but ready, and I can't say I could see this tangential proof of God, right? And that's often when I have little faith, I look for the third degree and the second degree stuff happening around me. And that place put me on a drug called Suboxone, which is now more widely known, but back then was still pretty new. Like, this is going to save your life, buddy. I was like, amazing.
Yeah.
So I did my 30 days, I did my Suboxone, and marched on in life. The problem was, life didn't necessarily really get any better, right? It got somewhat better, but I still have to go get a drug. I still need that drug. Yeah. And the more I researched that drug, the more I learned, I just traded. So we could speed all the way on up. I'm now about 30. Yeah, 30.
Yeah.
Hurricane Sandy happens.
I remember.
Yep. And so I'm out of work. Bored, and
is this the hurricane that flooded the subways in New York?
Yes, Sandy was 2012. It's the one that destroyed Long Beach, the boardwalk, right? It was the superstorm. Yeah. So if you weren't kind of wrecked, you at least didn't have power for a while. Like, my business was out for like 6 weeks. Like, it was pretty nasty. And the town that I kind of grew up in, like the village area, still had power. Yeah. So everybody went there. So every day I just get up and march into town and go hang out with the dude at GameStop or the guy at Starbucks or whatever. Yeah. And one guy's like, you should come to this church with me. This girl I know goes there, and blah, blah, blah. So we walk into the vineyard, which I had been skateboarding behind and taking burgers from on Friday nights for ages, right? It's right by the movie theater, and behind that movie theater I used to get high. And the symmetry is just scarily odd, right? And I didn't believe anything, but I liked what they were doing. I liked that you could come in there and charge your phone or have a cup of coffee or eat, or they were organizing dig outs, and all this stuff was going on. I was like, wow, these guys are really relevant to like the community. That mattered to me. So they're like, hey, blah, 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 chat. You play guitar? Yeah. So again, here I am going to play
another church.
Yep. Except I have no more gear. All my cool gear was sold.
Yeah.
Right. And the coveted telly and the 76 SG and that amp I beg, borrowed and still for, it's all gone. I've got like one really bad guitar and like a delay pedal and a tuner. And I just walked down to the church. I didn't have a car. Yeah. And I had my little bag. Yeah. And I'm like, great. And I'm like, yeah, I learned that song Sweetly Broken. Like, sick. And I started playing. I'm like, it's all wrong. Like, yeah, man, we're playing in a different key. And I was like, what's a key?
Yeah.
What do you mean by that? I just learned it by ear.
Yeah.
So whatever. And then becomes my tutelage, right, happens where a guy who was the worship pastor was also in recovery. And he recognized a similar soul, found out about Suboxone, and which is gently confronted, but he met with me weekly.
Yeah.
They brought me to the youth group, and the youth group cut a hole in the fence to hang out with the other kids who were doing drugs behind the movie theater. You know, way younger than me, but like same people. And they'd be like, just go talk to them. I'd be like, why? Just go talk to them. Like, okay. And they would use me in youth group, and I would just talk to people. And like, slowly but surely.
And you're like 30.
Yeah. Oh, I'm 30. But I might as well be 15.
Yeah.
Right? Like my emotional barometer, like, you know, when you use, you can hit a pause button on emotional growth, right? And when you use the way I did. So in a lot of ways, I was jaded and world weary and all that stuff. And I presented as that way. But also I was just like a scared kid who didn't know what the heck was going on all at the same time.
Yeah.
But God is good in that way. And when you give that over, right? So when we talk about Sweetly Broke, I mentioned that for a reason. The concept of surrendering is super real, right? And what does that really look like? And then I started getting intentional about it. And I was going to AA, and I had a sponsor, and my sponsor did the first 3 steps, and he goes, okay, I can't go any further with you. I'm like, why? He's like, you got to get off the Suboxone, man. I was like, I've been trying. No doctor really will help me. I get down to the last bit, and then I start getting really, really sick.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it's worse than the heroin, my friend. I'm like, I'm telling you. So again, Ryan makes a conscious decision to pack up and go to rehab and get off of Suboxone, which people don't do. You don't go to rehab to get off the thing they give you to get off the other stuff.
Yeah.
So I just went, and they're like, why are you here?
Yeah.
Why are you doing this? I'm like, because I can't hear God.
Yeah.
Right? And I happened to land in this place that had a Christian wing to it, right? A side of it.
Yeah.
The owner heard that, and he's like, all right, I'm going to take care of this guy.
Yeah.
So I spent some time in Florida, got clean, came home, had post-acute withdrawal symptoms, was still sick. But the response I got coming home from people in the church, seeing my face, seeing I was probably 30 pounds heavier. No, more than that, probably 45 pounds heavier than I am even now. And I came back around this weight, and everyone was like, Ryan, who's this guy? You know? And
part of what I hear in this story too is like, you're hitting rock bottom, you're finding church again, they're putting you on the worship band. Worship pastor is pastoring you.
Real time, yeah.
They're sending you to the kids who were you.
Yep.
You know?
And all my friends were kids at the time too. It's worth noting that most of the worship team was fairly young.
Yeah.
And I was just like, wow, like I was uncomfortable with it. And then I realized God gave me this opportunity to kind of recapture things I lost. Like, what are the healthy versions of a relationship between two 20-somethings, even though I'm 30 now, right? Like, and
so getting the lessons you missed along the way somewhere.
Yeah, and humility, right? I'm like, this 19-year-old kid's real good at guitar, and he's teaching me how to transpose and use a capo, and, you know, and I'm like, I know music, but like, I don't know this. Yeah. But seeing the church from the perspective of, I still don't know what the heck this all is really to me, but watching them do what they do, worship and come together, and really experiencing people who are putting their feet underneath what they say they believe was, again, that's my tangential proof. But then I had all these other, like, I'm alive. I shouldn't be alive. By all rights, I should be a statistic. Matter of fact, the people who I know that I was in those groups with, 10, 12, 15 of them are statistics, right? Yeah. Like, very quickly, the people who you try to stay in touch with from those environments, they're gone. Yeah. And I had friends.
I just see the community around you, right?
Yes.
Like, so I see you going to AA. I see you going to get clean. And I think those are huge tools. But then there's also, without the community piece to come back to, you know,
as you say, it's both ends, right?
It's both ends, right? Like we do need to go to AA. We do need to go to recovery. We do need to do those things, but we need a community to exist in, right? Like a healthy place.
Absolutely. People ask me now, they're like, I don't know how to find friends. And I'm like, I guess go to church, man. That's where I got to recycle.
Yeah, that's right.
Everything in my life now
I love
is
that you just
tied.
used the word recycle too. Yeah. That's a beautiful word.
Yeah. It was like, that's where I got my recycle. That's where I got I'm turning 39. My daughter's 1. Yeah. You know, my wife is 10 years younger than me. I've gotten to be able to have the parts of my life I thought I would not have. And it's because I just started going in there and followed whatever little inner voice was like, you should just be here. Yeah, you're going to go back. Yeah, you're going to go sit and watch worship. I didn't play for a while. I would go watch worship practice. I would then go and be there on a Sunday. And then I'd go to youth group. So 3 times a week, I'm just going to this church over and over. And I basically work a bunch and go to the church. And then when I got off the Suboxone, that's when like everything really started shifting. I started getting intentional. I started thinking about, what does God really want me to do with my life? What does that mean?
Yeah.
And I don't have a lot of time to waste.
Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of like, let's get busy living and get busy dying. Well, I did the get busy dying part. It didn't work. So now I need to get busy living. And here was this place where like, go, do, you know, do what you want to do. And the meetings, right? Nothing, AA, NA, all that stuff. You want to learn good spirituality and practice without really know you're learning it, do it. Because it's living today.
Yeah.
Get down on your knees, submit,
Yeah.
give it up to God, admit you're powerless, ask for constant contact. And then the last 3 steps tell you to continue to serve others as a means to stay sober.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so that just blows the door wide open. And when you're doing your...
It's church.
Yeah.
It's church.
It's church.
Yeah.
For people who don't necessarily know they're doing church, and we water it down. But when you get a conscious, group consciousness exists in a meeting by the people in that meeting. So if they're doing the Christian perspective hard, they're doing it hard.
Yeah.
You know, and then when you find yourself speaking at other people's meetings, speaking at Narcan trainings, telling your story, bridging this gap from the addict who survived, having mothers come up to you crying, happy that you survived, even though their son didn't, will really, really, really like...
You find a purpose there.
Big time. Yeah. Big time.
So now I know you're a therapist, right?
Yes, therapist, yeah.
Yeah. So I'm assuming that all of this is leading you to this moment where you're like, gosh, this is what I'm here for.
How do I make meaning of this? To this point, the best job I could get myself together for, that was the most stable, was a GameStop manager. No shame in the retail game at all. And I'm grateful because that's what gave me the insurance to go do this thing. And but I was like, there's got to be more. I'm just not going to be happy. I'm vocationally minded, and I'm on the worship team. I half think I'm going to be a worship leader, right? Like a staff one, because that's what I see people doing, right? I've hit a couple of conferences at this point, and I'm like, this is what you do. You get in church, you go get a gig at a church, right?
I'm 30.
Yeah.
I'm
the age.
Yeah.
I could be a lead pastor tomorrow if someone would just train me.
That's right.
These guys won't do it. What's wrong with them, right? So, you know, the unhealthy relationship to church and serving and all of that, and music, my true love, is existing here. But at some point, if you're getting your creative juices from just executing worship on a Sunday really well, that's going to run thin too. And you're going to get all types of bitter and all types of fun stuff. So it was in those moments, and then someone asked me, what makes you angry? I was like, I don't know. Like, what do you mean, like, angry? I get angry at a lot of stuff, man, you know? Like, you know, and he's like, no, I mean, like, the right kind of angry. I was like, I don't know. I guess when I think about why I took a history degree, why I took classes like the history of genocide, why I did all of these things, I could just seek out this kind of macabre knowledge, right? And I wanted to have a big picture understanding, and I thought I could do that. And I'm like, I don't know. I was like real mad when I saw that movie Hotel Rwanda, or when I read this book, right? And he's like, oh, so injustice, huh? I was like, yeah. And I really hate the way addicts are treated. And I hate the way that men are expected to not engage in mental health and all this stuff. And then with my therapist who I've been working with for years on my own traumas, she's like, I absolutely see you being able to do this. I've been waiting for you to ask. Like, you seem tailor-made for this. I don't know why you would avoid it. And so I thought about it for a good long while. And then one day I got real motivated out of nowhere. And I was like, I'm just going to drive to a college. I just drove and parked wherever, and I walked in. I'm like, I'm interested in your master's program in social work, because it fed both. It fed the psychotherapy and it fed the social justice angle that I care about. So I was like, oh yeah, I mean, we're about to close, but sit down. Yeah. You want a meeting with someone in the school social work? Okay. I march on over, you know, not knowing that I didn't park in a spot I was supposed to, and that somebody might be annoyed. And they're like, hey, we're going to waive the fee. Just go and do the application as best you can. It's like, okay. So I do it. Get everything in by the end of the week, remarkably, including my recommendation letters. Thankfully, it was a pastor. And
that's right.
And all of a sudden, I'm having breakfast at my wife's cafe that she worked at, which is right by the house I was living in. And we were just dating at the time. And the school called, and they're like, hey, we're going to close down for like Christmas. And we don't know when you're going to get that thing, but you've been accepted, and you're in the accelerated program, and we waived all fees, and you don't have to go take the GRE or anything, because I've been in the school for ages at this point. Yeah. And they're like, we just can't wait to have you. I was like, oh.
How'd you feel?
Shocked. I really just threw it out there. And I picked this school, and I was like, finances, whatever. Like, I could have gone to cheaper schools, but this place could take me now. And I knew if I didn't go, I might not.
Yeah.
And I entered this program that meant I had to leave my job, do an internship. I was broke, like addict broke. I'm like, I know this game. I got $20 for 2 days, but I did it.
In New York.
Yeah. Going to Queens, doing an internship, going to seminars to understand what my whiteness means to the people I'm working with, like just hitting every stride I can, going to the church office, writing papers for 5-6 hours, not buying books because I couldn't afford it. And then 16 months later, I had a master's in social work. I took the licensing exam as fast as I could, and I was licensed, and my old therapist hired me. Yeah. And I just got straight to doing clinical work.
Yeah, and then what kind of stuff do you work with?
I work with, you name it. God is also funny in this department. He tends to give you things that you've walked through, right? Because I think you do get some sort of, what do we call it? I don't want to say dominance is the wrong word, but you end up getting this authority, is maybe a better word, over this thing. So my first group of clients, deceased parents, chronically ill. Then I start getting the addicts. Then now I'm people are talking about, no, he's a good therapist, right? Like, oh, he's a therapist. Yeah, he's a good guy, right? Oh, he's a young guy. He's he's really down to earth, right? And I just start getting newer and newer experiences. I can't think of an issue I haven't necessarily worked with, but the bunch now seems to be men with repressed traumas. Pandemic, man, it's been ugly, and you gotta address this thing that happened to you. I mean, it's a stark reminder when you have a grown man weeping before you who has never told this story before. Yeah. And this happened to him when he was 12. And you're like, bing, oh God, this is why you had me do all this. And that's right. It's that existentialism in motion, right? Like, I have to apply meaning to my experiences, or that's what we are as humans. We're meaning-making machines. Absolutely. Yeah. And we can make tons of terrible meanings.
Yeah. Well, what I love about your story here is that, you're going to become a therapist. You are a therapist. And you're seeing in your clients all the things that you've experienced. Yeah. That saying, hurt people hurt people. Yeah. But like the opposite is also true, right? Like healed people heal people.
I like that.
I do too. I mean, I'm really hearing it in your story. I'm also very vulnerable to these kinds of stories.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know where this was going to go.
No, I feel them. I just feel them, and I'm very vulnerable to just addiction and recovery stories. And that's never really been a part of my story. It has been tangentially, but not like me. I've never been an addict, but I can feel the work of God in this kind of story, and I know what it means because, man, like the people at my church who have, over the years, over the 2 decades that I've been doing church work, people who have suffered the most and who've in many ways had the hardest time overcoming their stuff have all been like addicts. Yeah. And that's that's the stuff that hurts. When you see people just. So when I get to hear a story like this, I'm very vulnerable to it.
Yeah, I understand. I sometimes, I guess I can grow callous to this stuff, right? I can grow callous to like even my own experience, because now I just live in other people's experiences often enough that I forget sometimes where I came from. But then there are moments where you're reminded, right? Like one time I had done a bunch of Narcan trainings in Nassau County, and there was a guy whose son died. And on Father's Day, I was going to visit my father, and his son's plot was like, I kid you not, like right there. And we just had this moment. Yeah. And like we didn't talk. I just walked over and gave the guy a hug.
That's right.
And I drove off, and I was like, what is going on? Yeah. Right? And there's my parents have 2 graves on top, and there's one there for the wayward son. Me. Yeah. Right? Like this one might not make it because my mom was alive long enough to know. And or if one of us just died unmarried, you can be buried with your parents, right?
That's right.
And I was having this defiant moment with that headstone, and I forget that is like part of how I got where I am. And I've buried a lot of people, and it never gets easy. There's people like you get a Facebook memory, like, oh, they're gone, and I'll still see people who are active in the rooms, and like they'll be posting about some guy, and I'm like, still it's gone, right? Because overdoses went up again, like a ton, like more than ever. Yeah. And
when the fentanyl thing hit,
oh my God,
it's just right. Especially even like where I live in Kentucky, it's like really
it's everywhere.
Yeah, it's done a number
everywhere.
Okay.
You're not safe from it anywhere. Yeah.
Well, okay. Can we make a right turn here for a
Please.
second?
Yeah.
Okay. So number one, thanks for telling
Sure.
all this stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I think just even the telling the story is going to mean a lot to a lot of people
Cool.
who are living these kinds of experiences. But I think it would be awesome if maybe just for a moment, maybe we could talk about trauma.
Sure.
It's very interesting. I didn't really know these details about your story before we came in here and did this podcast, but I was just taking some notes and I was thinking, we haven't really talked a lot about trauma on this podcast. And I mean, the theme of this podcast is fermentation. It's like transformation.
Yeah.
But one of the themes in this podcast is oftentimes the things that change people are pain, right? Like pain can oftentimes change you for good. But if you don't have a meaning-making system for it, like you said a moment ago, pain can really malform you.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So can we just talk about trauma here for a second? Like, what do you want to say to someone who's like, because there are people who are listening to this podcast who have experienced trauma.
Yeah.
Maybe similar to yours, or maybe very different. I'm even thinking of people who are listening to this podcast and maybe they grew up in a very abusive home. Maybe they were sexually abused, maybe they were physically abused, or maybe they were just psychologically and emotionally abused. And, you know, maybe they've never processed that and they're just thinking, Ryan, do I really have to process it? Can I just ignore it and be a good person? Talk to me about that, because this is something that we feel, you know.
Absolutely. No, I mean, and the flippant answer is you can try.
Yeah.
You know, and you can push on through, sure.
Yeah.
You know. Will you miss out on most of what I find meaningful in life? Possibly. Right? Will you miss out on human connection? Will you miss out on the experience of being healed? Because it's not like there's miraculous healing and then there's the miracle of like I'm working through this pain with God and I don't even know it's happening until it's done. Like some of the stories I've shared, and you look back and you go, oh, miracle, right? Like
that's right.
That I could do that at all was supernaturally buoyed up, right?
Come on.
And so, I would have loved to have been just, boom,
zap.
There you go, Ryan. That would have been great. But apparently, just like trying to leave Long Island, it's not why I have my experience, right? And I'm comfortable with my meaning-making machine, right? Because now it's like a crusade for me. We're going to destigmatize mental health. Yeah. People should get help. I don't care where you are, who you are, right? And so it's never been more available now, which is nice. But can you avoid these traumas, and particularly these hard ones? No, right? Like, no, you can't. Because if we get Freudian for like 2 seconds and we go to the egocentric mind of a child and you know, neurons firing together that are wiring together and associations being built, that childhood experience is going to color every aspect of how you see the world. And you already know it. You could see the proof in your relationships, in some of maybe even the diagnoses you've been given. Yeah. And maybe
it's just wild. We literally carry it in our bodies, don't we?
100%. Yeah. Right? Like there's nature and nurture, and there's some that I see that are just like, yeah, that's a genetic thing, right? Yeah. Often it's your experience that expresses that genetic potential to, say, addiction. Just because it's in your family doesn't mean you have to be an addict, right? Yeah. Like, so what happens to a child when this happens to them? Everything they know is questionable now, right? So the things you trusted at a time in your life where you only understand the spaces around you. I have a daughter. I see it all the time. Yeah. It's, I'm going to go over there and bump and go, and then I'm here, baby. Okay, off they go, right? The I want freedom, but I want to know you're still there. Yeah. What happens when the I want to know you're still there doesn't happen? Mm-hmm. Or the person who's supposed to be, I'm still here, baby, is the one harming you. Yeah. Right? You now learn a wild distrust of the world around you, right? Mm-hmm. That's why you, like, these childhood experiences tend to equal eating disorders, gambling addiction, drug addiction, on and on and on, right? Yeah. Like their adverse childhood experience. It's called the ACEs study, right? And like you get that questionnaire and you just watch the potential for adult issues go up. Healing that trauma, trying to deal with that trauma, right? Like, and I mean, really deep down in where it's like, hey man, when I was asked, what promise did you make to yourself that day your dad died? And I was like, I don't know, what do you mean? Like, there was a moment, tell me your story. So I retold the day, right? Kind of re-traumatizing myself for the story. And there was a moment, she's like, that. What did you tell yourself when that happened? Like, oh. And I built an entire way of behaving and viewing the world off of that moment. You can't escape that. That's real. This is why therapists are good, right?
Yeah,
because they can find these threads and go, oh, so I can see this core belief of yours. All the while, I'm digging for the core beliefs, and there's a few, and they're often maladaptive, right? And we need to invite God into that.
I love this. I'm so glad that you're sharing this. I mean, it's weird, like when we're sitting in our little studio here between two ferns.
Between two ferns.
Yeah,
nice version.
It's obvious, right? Like we could talk about your life and you have enough perspective on it and somebody's helped you mine that.
Yeah.
And so like even right now you're fairly unemotional about it, even though it's painful, and you're able to see the meaning making you did.
Yeah.
But without that person, like you're blind to it.
Without that person, I'm a drug addict.
Yeah. And I guess that's another thing I wanted to ask you is like, why are we so, like, it's so funny. Like, how is it that we could be the people who actually live these experiences, and then, you go a year or 2 or 5 or 10 past them, and then we become blind to who we are. Like, we can't see ourselves.
Yeah.
It's the wildest thing to me.
All things become mundane, right? Good, bad, or indifferent, and when that worship pastor had come back to church, he had left, and he's doing his thing in the city. He's a producer. He's whatever. So haven't talked to him much. And he came back, and I don't even think he's ever seen me sing because I didn't sing until 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Right. And my wife's a fantastic singer, and I was like, I think I have a voice. And people are like, well, the parable of the talents, whatever. So I invested in singing.
Yeah.
And so now I'm leading a song, and I'm leading No Longer Slaves. Yep. Right. And this guy is just weeping because he's like, I remember you, Ryan. Yeah. I remember that guy. And I was like, oh, wow, yeah, that was intense. And I remember crying with him in the hallway, just like, right? And you, like, for whatever, you're just a dude too, but like, you were used instrumental in me having a relationship with God in a way that worked for me. And also, the church is the one who sent me to a therapist and said, we got your sessions for the beginning of it. And
beautiful.
And that therapist was like, I'm just going to work with you. I know you can't afford this. I'm just going to work with you.
Beautiful.
Right? And so it was done by generosity because they were people who believed in God and they felt this was a thing worthwhile. And you lose this. And dude, I can tell these stories and tell them like this. I can also be up at 4 a.m. in the hotel room like, oh my God, I can't believe I shared that story. Yeah. Everybody knows. Therapists are supposed to not tell about themselves, right? Which I think is nonsense because my story is what gives weight to what God's doing. So I
think so too. Well, and here's one of the things I hear in your story, Ryan, and I'm glad you're framing it this way. Because in the vineyard, I mean, we're charismatics.
Yeah.
Like, we're at a conference right now. There have been ministry times. There will be more ministry times. Like, we believe, like, inherent in vineyard theology is the belief that God could meet us in a moment and rearrange things and change who we are, right? Yeah. So we do believe that. And at the same time, one of the things I love is about your story, and I actually love this about our vineyard theology, is we also have space for what I've learned from Susan O'Brien. Susan calls it the slow work of God, right? So there's the fast work of God that may happen at a conference like this, but like things like trauma, like God may want to surface that at the conference just to be like, I'm going to touch you, and like there may be a power encounter there, but oftentimes it's the slow work of God because we have to get down to the meanings we made.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I'll tell you just this one really quick story. I have like a spiritual director person in my life. It's not exactly therapy. It's not therapy. It's like they mostly just ask you questions.
Yeah.
And spent some time with them. And after just doing some work, some stuff about my own like coming up.
Yeah.
Kind of kept these stories kept coming into our conversations, and this person said, well, hey, I think you should do some work on inner vows that you made as a kid, right? Different language. You're using meaning making. They use the word language inner vows. I was like, sure. Well, what do you even mean, right? But anyway, we took it took 6 months. I mean, that's like literally how detached I was from it. But one of the things that came through for me is as a pretty young kid, I made the inner vow, or the meaning I had made in the world was no one will help me, right?
Yeah.
I only got that last year. I'm 42.
Yeah.
So I've been carrying around this worldview from the time that I was pretty young. No one will help me. dumb.
It is. But it's amazing how.
Yeah, but what I'm saying here is like, oh, we need people who are gifted in the slow work of God, whether it's a counselor, a therapist, a spiritual director, a pastor, maybe all of them, because they're all kind of different in some ways. But we need people who can help us see the Spirit at work doing that underground thing. Absolutely.
Yeah. You need it. I mean, I remember I did a run. It was just Ignatian spiritual direction, right? I just go to this woman's house. She asked me questions. A month later, I come back. And it was actually right after we met, right? Because I was having this like, I think God's calling me to this, this, and this, and this is how I see it. And we went to that retreat, and I was like, me and my wife are going to be the worship pastors and this and that. And I got back, and my wife became the worship director, and this guy was not. And I was like, and I'm like, I invited God in every step of the way, and then he was like, no, man, not that.
Yeah.
But what did happen on that retreat is Melissa heard me talking about being a therapist and said, do you want to do this emotional intelligence workshop? And I was like, huh. So I did it. I just off the cuff did it. Yeah. It was amazing. Yeah. And she's amazing. It was really, really cool experience. Yeah. And I still couldn't appreciate the fact that, like, yeah, my wife went there and sung. I didn't play guitar. I'm a pretty good guitar player, right? Like, you could set me with some pedals. I got it. It's fine, And I'm like,
you know how to transpose now.
Now I know how to transpose.
You can use the capo.
And I'm comfortable playing
different keys.
Yep, I'm all over
F.
it.
You can even play an F.
Absolutely. Yeah. And Johnny Greenwood was my guitar hero, so I know how to do modern worship guitar. It's fine. And I'm like,
two delay pedals.
Two or three, but mostly reverbs, right? And a modulation. And you do it, and you know the parts and whatever. And I was like, man, I had written this whole thing. I had this vision, all this stuff, but it was my wife, right? So what am I going to do? Be really outwardly bitter? Like, no, I just went to my pastor. I'm like, I think I need some spiritual direction or something. Like, I'm feeling the type of way. He's like, here you go. I did it, and then that's this. And this is another moment for me. I'm having like an outer body experience, knowing that this moment between me and you here is part of that slow story of my past being rectified for a purpose to be a part of. When they say everybody can play, this is how I get to play.
That's right.
And I never liked public speaking. I found myself doing it. I never liked imposing myself. I'm a good 9 on the Enneagram. I was joking about we love the 9s, right? We love our Enneagrams. As a therapist, I don't use them, but like in the context of understanding yourself, they're like an awesome starting tool. And I'm like, I'm a good 9. Yeah. I'm just like, yeah, man, let's make some peace. Everybody, let's play, Yeah. And then I can undermine my own self in that process and be like, no, but I actually have a legit perspective that is unique and that.
And you should share it.
I should. And if I don't.
We're weaker. Not just you, but we are.
And that's a hard pill to swallow, right? To sit there and be like, oh, yeah, do that. Even you saying that makes me feel like I'm aggrandizing myself. I'm like, who is aggrandizing that much pain for profit, for themselves? It's a strange thing to do. I'm going to tell you terrible things that happen to me, and it's going to make me look better in your eyes? No, generally not. Yeah. But that trauma is now I have these specific marching orders, right? Like I had this, like you said, that inner promise, the thing for me, I had this whole blueprint I built for my life around surviving, just surviving, never prosper, never get more. You don't deserve more. If the car has 4 wheels, you don't need to fix the flat, Ryan. But if this person needs money, you give it to them, right? Yeah. And so I never had enough for me. Yeah. And God was like, oh, we'll break that too. Yeah. We'll break that too. And
isn't that amazing?
And he does, and repeatedly. So this long work is still happening. It's still going on. It's just recently that I've spoken about mental health in a church capacity. And it started at that retreat. And I remember like finally waking up to that through the spiritual direction. And then the pandemic happened. Yeah. And like, it was that February, I found out I was having a baby. I was like, oh my God, we're having a baby. It's gonna be, I never thought honestly, still didn't believe I'd end up being a dad at that moment. Yeah. And then we get locked down. I was like, oh, I guess so much for that stuff. But I am a therapist, right? So
you're just going to work?
I'm working out of the second room. Again, we live by the beach in Long Island, very small apartment, 2 Chihuahua mixes, and my pregnant wife. And she's watching whatever, and I'm cranking a sound machine and talking to people off a cardboard box because I thought it would be over soon, Yeah. And you just kept doing it, and I lost touch with that stuff. Then as things open back up, it's like, oh, right, there was this other stuff I really, really cared about that God started like just knocking more and more on.
Well, I mean, I think Yeah, this is clearly a part of your story, the professional work that you do Monday to Friday, but then also this other piece, which is to share your story, but then to do it in a way that actually opens people up to say, I do need to do the brave work of dealing with me.
Please.
Yeah.
Please, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just going to assume generally the people we're talking about here are, right, like me, like worship people, church-going folk, right? And, like...
But how many times do we know the story of like a church person, a pastor, a worship leader who has a great ministry and maybe like has a great church and good friends, but there's something in the back that they haven't dealt with.
Yeah.
And it's time, right?
There's no way that's not coloring how you handle, like it informs, like we're comfortable talking about implicit biases in diversity sense, right? Like at least we're getting comfortable, hopefully.
Yeah, we're beginning to, I think.
Yeah. And like, but what about in the mental health sense? What about how when person A on the team comes in with some type of energy and I'm like, man, this, right? And it's like, oh, I'm responding to somebody else that this person reminds me. I'm not even responding to the human in front of me.
Yeah.
Right? I'm just talking to ghosts behind them and person A from my past that made me feel that way. So when you're in leadership or attempting leadership, anything like wholeness,
yes.
Right? I mean, mental health and emotional health are the bedrock to behavioral health and spiritual health, right? They all intertwine.
That's right.
But you cannot ignore some at the expense of others.
Yeah. I mean, we're even doing a series right now at our church on emotionally healthy spirituality. It's like a classic book.
Yeah.
But like one of the things that's at the very beginning of the book is it says, you can't be spiritually mature and remain emotionally immature. I mean, it's so simple, but it's like, yeah, of course, right?
Yeah, of course. You read that, you go, of course. But I'm going to go ahead and not get emotionally mature.
Yeah.
I'm going to be rude to this guy because, like I can't
just
be empathetic and step outside my personal experience and understand that, like, oh, this guy is also going through stuff. And it's like, I think as the church, right, as we want to grow and advance the kingdom, and there's questions of relevancy and societal stuff. I mean, like I said, in Long Island, like nobody's like just walking like into church often and be like, hey, like, you know what I mean? Like it's there's never a problem of too many people wanting to serve, right? And so you have to think about, well, what are we like putting forward into the community? What are we? If we're a public-facing facility, right, we need to be mentally and emotionally healthy, because there might be that person who came in there on some nudge and you were in a bad mood that day and you blew them off. Except now we don't know what that person's leaving to. We just don't.
Well, and there's also just other factors of being like emotionally mature, like how we lead our teams and how we show up at home, and it's such a big deal.
It's a lot. God puts a lot of demands on us, I think, right? Like, I mean, you're never done growing, it would seem.
It would seem.
Well,
here's what I think we ought to do.
Yeah.
We've chatted a lot.
We have.
So we should just wrap it. I think we've said a lot. But what I would love to do is, in the next year or so, next time we're like hanging out, let's just do another episode, and let's just do it about like growing emotional maturity. Just like basic everyday, just be a bigger person.
I'm into it. Yeah, I'm pretty verbose. I know. I'm like, I wonder how long we've been doing this thing.
No, we're good, man. This is good. And the story is so good. But I just want to say again, Ryan, thanks for sharing your story and telling us like who you are and what's going on. And it's going to bless a lot of people.
Thanks for having me.
All right.
Really.
Peace.
Hey everyone, Casey Corum here, producer of the podcast. Thanks for listening. As always, if you've been enjoying the podcast, here's a few ways you can help us. First of all, leave us a review on the podcast platform of your choice. This helps more people find us. Also, connect with us on social media. Instagram at the Ferment Podcast and Twitter at FermentCast. All right, everyone. Thanks for listening. See you next week. Peace.